Now for your Sunday Viewpoint.
Good morning. I'm Pat Lawson-Muse. More than 6 million Americans and nearly 10,000 D.C. residents have developmental disabilities. Helping them work, take care of themselves, and make productive contributions to their families, their neighborhoods, schools, and communities is the mission of this morning's guests. Joining me now are Matthew McCullough. He's Executive Director of the D.C. Developmental Disabilities Council, also known as DDC. Andrew Reese is Director of D.C.'s Department on Disability Services, that's DDS. And Nathan Wakefield is Director and Executive Chef at Embassy Suites. Welcome, all of you, to Viewpoint. Andrew, your agency oversees and coordinates services for roughly 2,300 D.C. residents. Tell us, with developmental disabilities, tell us how you do that.
Right. We have two administrations within the Department on Disability Services. There's the Developmental Disabilities Administration that provides support services for people with intellectual disabilities, and they support about 2,300 people to help them live as independently as possible in the community. We also have the Rehabilitation Services Administration, and that currently works with close to 5,000 people, and the goal of the Rehabilitation Services Administration is to help all people with disabilities obtain, regain, or advance in employment.
So you connect people, you work with people who have developmental disabilities and basically help them find training and find jobs after they're trained.
Right. We work with them to provide whatever services they need to move toward an employment outcome, and for people with intellectual disabilities to ensure that, first and foremost, that if they are interested and able, that they're able to work, and also they're able to live independently and integrate fully into our community.
Matthew, the nonprofit National Organization on Disability says something like 20% of people with disabilities in this country have jobs, yes, versus roughly 70% of people who don't have disabilities. What does that say to us, and what should it say to us?
That means that we should do a lot more work in simply connecting those citizens to job support, such as the health and other programs that support citizens with disabilities. It also means that we need to support our citizens to speak up and have them understand their choices in terms of those employment settings as well. Mm-hmm.
And you actually connect families and clients with the services that they need?
I do. So the DD Council really serves to empower our citizens with DD and their families to speak up in terms of the types of services that they want, for them to have a good quality of life, which also includes the employment services that any gives.
Okay. Nathan, you're with Embassy Suites. You're one of the partners.
I am.
This whole network wouldn't work without companies like yours.
I think that's correct, and we're happy to be in this partnership with DDS and DC Public Schools. We have a program called Project Search, which helps bring young adults in for internships, gives them some classroom time, but also gives them real experience in jobs, really working on the floor type of time. And when we do that, they do 3 separate rotations per year, so they get an opportunity to try 3 different skill sets, and we see where their strengths are and basically prepare them to enter the workforce.
So the Project Search involves hotels such as yours, and I understand there are other hotels in that program.
Yeah, in this program right now, we started with 2 hotels last year. It was our first year in the program. This year we expanded it to 4 hotels. So it's our property at the Convention Center. We have the Capitol Hilton, the DoubleTree Crystal City, as well as the Embassy Suites Crystal City, all involved in the program, and all have interns working in them right now.
And Andrew, you're working with hotels as well as other organizations?
Right.
Partners.
That's
Smithsonian
correct.
Is one of them?
Yes. The Smithsonian we've been working with for 4 years. We also work with National Institutes of Health. We have a Project Search site at both of those that prepare young people. Those are a little bit broader. They work with youth 18 to 30, and that's a partnership between the DC Rehabilitation Services and the Maryland Rehabilitation Services Agency as well.
Matthew, what would you say are the most common misconceptions about those who have developmental disabilities?
Well, I would say that there's a misconception that people really don't want to work. People do want to work. They They just need to be given the proper supports and services in order to show their talents and abilities. And so until we do that, you will still experience low employment rates among citizens with disabilities.
Nathan, he says that the impression is, the misconception is that most people think that those with developmental disabilities don't want to work. Is that your understanding? Is that?
I think that, it's a couple different things. I think that, first of all, we need to stop looking at folks with disabilities and immediately thinking what they can't do rather than what they can do. I also think as employers, you need to understand that, there are some accommodations that need to be made, but they're minimal. It's a minimal effect on your business. And I think, there is a general, not necessarily fear, but are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to be able to, take on, someone with disabilities in the area? And one of the things we've learned is that it's very simple to do. You have to a little bit more patience, a little bit extra training, but beyond that, there's nothing really that needs to be done. But you got to look at the individuals too. You want to play to each individual's strengths, and that's what's great about the internship is the fact that folks get to go through 3 different skill sets to really see what their passion is. And I think that with what Matthew's saying, he's absolutely right. Everyone wants to contribute. Everybody wants to not be a burden, and everybody wants to do well. And I think from what we've seen out of the individuals that have gone through the program that did get hired, that are now in full-time positions, you see that. You see that the excitement and everything else that's tied into it.
All right. We'll continue our talk right after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. March is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, and so we are calling attention to that issue this morning and some of the challenges and successes of helping those with developmental disabilities live in our communities and in our families and in our neighborhoods. Andrew Reese, the point that Nathan made just before the break about employers fearing that if they hire those with developmental disabilities, they won't be able to meet the standard, so to speak. Talk about that a little more.
Well, there's the Americans with Disabilities Act that requires employers to provide accommodations for people with disabilities to be able to succeed. And then that scares them because they think if I take this person on, I may be taking on a huge expense. The reality is that what we know is that the average cost of an accommodation for people is less than $500. And so it really is more of a fear than the actuality. And when we hear some examples of the kinds of small accommodations, and I think Nathan can describe some their hotel uses, there's really minimal cost involved with accommodating for people to be successful in employment.
Okay, and Matthew, you talked earlier about one of the misconceptions being that many people think those with developmental disabilities don't want to work. Yeah. Is it that they don't want to work, or do people think they can't work?
I believe that the general population has a hard time believing that they can work, and so I'm a person with DD, and so there were a lot of barriers and challenges placed upon me when I was growing up, and so trying to work through those challenges and barriers really strengthened my thought process on how to work through many of those challenges as an adult.
Mm-hmm. And you, tell us about some of your experiences, for example.
So the fact that as a child, there's a perception that students with disabilities are not able to actually learn. Well, if you're given the appropriate support and services in order to be part of the classroom, part of the general curriculum, that translates into better outcomes in workplace as well, because they can take those skills and abilities and apply what they learned in the school to the workplace, and Andy can talk more about that as well.
Nathan, you're actually working in the schools.
We are.
You're working with youngsters before they graduate, and it's important to start that training before they graduate. Talk about why.
It is. I think that the earlier that you can start building these job skills and start building the confidence behind the job skills, the better off that the student has to really succeed on them. We try to, our program is basically 18 to 21-year-olds, but we do have some that are still finishing up school while they're with us. The Project Search program gives them a little bit of classroom time on each day day basis where they learn about kind of what it means to have a job, what clocking in, clocking out, small things. And they have job coaches that help them through that. And then they get real-time experience too. And as Andy said, we're talking about some of the accommodations. Well, one that we had to make was we had a young gentleman who would work for several days and then he would not be there for a few days and would tend to forget when he came back what he was supposed to do. It took us 5 minutes to take some pictures of him with what his duties were through the day and post it. And now he knows if he gets confused, he goes back, looks at the pictures, and he moves on with his day. Little things like that. And, accommodations, a little bit of extra patience, a little bit of extra training. It's important, too, to have your team bought in on it as well. And, that was something that we were wondering what was going to happen when we started this program, how our team was going to react to it, having folks come in. And it's just the embracement that's happened has been fantastic. I couldn't be proud of our team. We've expanded the program from last year to this year, and we're going to expand the program again from this year to next year, including more hotels and including more individuals.
Andrew, the 2014 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act made a big difference in what you're trying to do. Tell us what that act means and how it's made a difference.
So the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act in 2014, its intent was to improve the whole workforce system to ensure that we were providing the assistance to the people who had the most significant barriers to entering the workforce. And for people with disabilities, what that has meant is they've imposed an obligation on us, a necessary one, that we start working with students while they're still in school. It also has required us to devote more of our resources to people with most significant disabilities. And most importantly, in D.C., it's required us to do a much better job at coordinating services between all the different workforce agencies. And what we're seeing now is by this better coordination that we're better supporting people and moving more people on a pathway to the middle class and to success in the district.
All right, we're going to take a break and we'll continue our talk as we recognize Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about developmental disabilities this morning on For Your Sunday Viewpoint. And Matthew, what do most people need to understand about developmental disabilities and the people who come to you, the families, the advocates? What is it that they need to understand in order to work their way through the process of learning how to find employment, getting job training, taking care of themselves and their families?
So first of all, let's talk about what does DD really mean. So it's based on the federal law, which means that a person with DDE, there's at least 3 major life activities impacted, and it's long-term, and it's been diagnosed before the age of 22. In many cases, a citizen with DDE is generally born with a disability. So, for example, I was born with cerebral palsy, which is a development disability, and so my major life activities are impacted in terms of moving, talking, and partially deaf as well. And so I meet that criteria. And so when I work with families and advocates, I tell them that they have ownership over their own quality of life, and that in order for them to have a better quality of life, they may need to be connected to certain services that allow them to be productive citizens in the community. And so I work with NELI and other agencies on making sure that our citizens are connected to the proper support and services. And at the end of the day, once they're connected, the whole mindset of being self-determined and self-empowered is so much higher than before, because now they're starting to understand the service system that they're working with simply because of being connected to the various services that are available to them.
So, Nathan, all those services that they find available to them, once they receive these services, once the youth get job training, once they find work, and you're helping them keep work, what's the retention rate like?
The retention rate has actually been very good. Last year, in our program alone, we graduated 7 students, 6 found full-time employment. Not just in the hospitality industry either. Most of their skills were hospitality-based, but we have students that went on to work in retail areas, students that went into work in property operations. So the core of the program is really about building skills to have a job. Not necessarily a hotel job, but understanding what it's like to have a job. And this really builds a lot of loyalty from the individuals to the employer.
Sure.
A study was done several years ago where if you look at folks with disabilities that had over a three-year period that had a full-time job, there was an 8% turnover rate, whereas the industry standard was over 40%. So there's a lot of loyalty that's built in when folks, feel that they've got the job, that they're good with it.
And that's a big benefit to the employer.
It's a huge benefit to the employer. One of the most costly things you have is turnover. It costs money to hire new people and train them. So if you can keep your team together, then you're going to be much more successful if you're not constantly looking for the next thing.
Andrew, I understand that the employment rate for those with developmental disabilities is actually higher in the district than it is nationwide.
Well, that's true. The statistic that you gave earlier of 20% employment for people with disabilities in D.C., the employment rate for adults with disabilities is 32%. So we are doing much better. However, the employment rate for people without disabilities is 76%. So we still do have a long way to go. And another really important statistic is the earnings, which in the district, we actually have one of the biggest gaps between people with disabilities and without disabilities. The difference in earnings is $5,000 per year, whereas in the rest of the country, there's a smaller difference. We in the district have a unique problem. We have one of the most educated communities in the country, and at the same time we have a serious problem with a high percentage of people who have lower skills in terms of reading and math. And we also have a very high median income, but we also have a large population of people who are entering at the lower levels of employment whose earnings are far behind.
Okay. Matthew, you're shaking your head. You're in agreement.
Yes, I am. In terms of citizens with disabilities, it basically comes to access to the education system at the beginning, and what Andrew mentioned, for a lot of people, they get their high school diploma, and so for our citizens, they may not graduate with a diploma, and so what are the avenues that are available to them to explore if they cannot necessarily get their high school diploma and go off to a post-secondary opportunity? And so it definitely requires certain coordination among certain partners to actually make that work.
Okay, alrighty. We'll continue our talk in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Andrew, if when the ACA is appealed or reformed, how's that going to impact you? What you're doing?
A large concern. Well, my hope is that it won't impact us because the district will step up and do what's necessary to support people with disabilities in D.C. But our tremendous concern is that currently we have almost universal coverage of health insurance for people in D.C. So pulling back on that, in addition, there's been a lot of talk in Congress about block granting Medicaid, which would then turn over to the states' Medicaid. There's been a lot of advances lately in ensuring that services are provided in the community. There's been support from the federal government to do that. So we'd want to see that continue. We're really concerned about the breadth of insurance coverage continuing so that all people have access to quality health care.
Matthew, there have been some very good portrayals, sensitive, I should say, portrayals of people with developmental disabilities in film and literature and on stage. In your opinion, has it helped to educate, integrate, sensitize people, help them understand?
It has definitely indeed improved the image that actors with disabilities can actually do those roles, and my hope is to see more actors with disabilities playing those roles going forward. Because
many of the actors who've been cast in these roles have not been people with developmental disabilities. They've just been playing the role.
A great example of recent show has been speechless. And there has been an actor with Dee Dee serving that role, and that has been a great celebration among our community.
Wonderful. Nathan, a big success story.
Oh, every time I'm asked that question, I immediately go to a young gentleman named Rodrigo. Rodrigo started with us in our first term, and we were all kind of getting to learn the program at the same time. And Rodrigo was very quiet and had some things. I almost left the program, but then came back. And then Rodrigo got in and started doing his internships, and then he started doing his rotations and being around people and doing jobs and doing things and working with the team. And I got to say, one of the biggest success, and Andy was there for it, was Rodrigo gave us his graduation speech last year.
Oh, wonderful.
For the group.
Very quickly, you've got a couple of events coming up.
Thank you. Yes, we do. On March the 10th at the Convention Center, we have the Transition Forum, which is provided for high school students and their families, and that's from 10 to 2 at the D.C. Convention Center. March the 21st is our Developmental Disabilities Awareness Recognition, and that's at 250 East Street Southwest at our office.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for being with us. That's for your Sunday Viewpoint. News for Today is next.